first applications of GuMNet data, not just from the station here at Herreria, but from every GuMNet station, has been the analysis of surface air temperature over the Sierra de Guadarrama and its surroundings. Now, in order to do that, observational data from the GuMNet stations and some other stations from the Spanish meteorological surveys has been compared to a model, to a regional climate model. Observational data in this case is used to evaluate the performance of the model. Now, the study was divided in two parts. For the first part, temperature and its variability were analyzed for the last 20 years. Results show that temperature distribution over the area is closely related to orography, that is, to the terrain. But there is something we all know, that the highest parts of the mountains are colder than the lowlands around it. But there's something a bit peculiar in this case, which is that temperature decreases in a very linear way. Also, temperatures on the northern plateau seem to always be below those on the southern plateau. Now, regarding the temperature variability, results show that this temperature, temperature variability is, so as to say, changes in temperature through time with respect to a mean value. So results show that the ranges of temperature variability are wider with increasing height. Also, we found it noteworthy that these changes in temperature are the behavior of temperature variability over the area is very homogeneous. That is, that temperature behaves in time for the last 20 years in the same way for all the area. You know, it doesn't matter if it is on any point on any of the plateaus or on the top of the mountains. For the second part of the work, we focused our analysis on temperature trends over the last 20 years. And we saw that there has been a warming in the vast majority of the area, more pronounced in autumn on the southern plateau, where trends over 1 Celsius degree per decade can be found. Now, if we extend these analysis to the last decades, up to the second half of the 20th century, we saw that there's been a warming in almost every site since about the 1950s. But although this warming is uneven through time, it's more pronounced too in autumn. However, and that this is regarding to global change, in the case of the Sierra de Guadarrama, there is no clear evidence, no clear relation between warming and increasing altitude. And that would be all.
This part of the meteorology deals mainly with the transfer processes from the surface to the lower layer close to the ground. We are especially interested in the boundary layer, or the atmospheric boundary layer, which is the part roughly around 1 kilometer, where we have a contrasting along the day, a very specific daily cycle of different temperature, wind, and other meteorological variables, and also the turbulent fluxes. So we are able to have the characteristic of the cooling and surface, the cooling during the night and the heating during the day, and the changes of the stability along the 24 hours along the day. So one of the very interesting things that we evaluate is as some other larger scales phenomena like mountain breezes, which are specifically studied in this environment, uh, interaction with turbulent processes. So why is this place interesting to study turbulence and also mountain breezes? Well, because we have a very clear slope, local slope, which is the Avantos mountain, and then we have a very clear direction, wind direction during the night, a very clear wind direction during the day. What is the origin of these flows, which are called thermally driven flows? This is because the difference in temperature between the slope and the air in the surrounding makes differences in pressure and then generates winds. So during the night, we have that cold winds come downslope from the northwest, while during the day we have the opposite direction coming from the southeast. So this is a very repetitive cycle, and it is really very interesting how the different conditions, for example, at surface, where we can measure the temperature and soil moisture, uh, influences the wind speed. So, for example, when we have a drier conditions, like in summer, we usually have larger speeds, larger wind speeds. So this produce a different stability processes during the afternoon and evening transition to the nocturnal stable boundary layer, creating different transfer processes. So this is one of the main things that we study at this place. Uh, on one side, we study the change in the daily wind direction from night to day with these mountain breezes, and the interaction and the influence of these mountain breezes on the turbulent characteristics. So for that, we see how during some of the nights we have stronger winds, and this creates a neutrally to unstable boundary layer, and then the interchanges of heat, momentum, matter, like humidity or CO2, carbon dioxide, or water vapor, enhances during these nights. While on the other hand, when we have slower winds, for example, when we have more humidity on soil, then normally we have a very calm winds, and then the stability is very strong, and the turbulent interchange is inhibited. So depending of which kind of turbulent transfer we have, this determines the interchange of another transfer properties, as I have said before. It is especially interesting the transfer of CO2, because the advection of these winds generate a lot of transfer in this way. So we have done recently a PhD where one of the places we have studied is this place, the area forest. And some of the main conclusions that we have got is related that you have a very repetitive mechanism, especially when we have what it is we normally call good weather. So we have weak synoptic situation where there are low, strong pressure gradient, for example, we have anticyclonic conditions, and in that cases we have this very repetitive cycle from winds from northwest during the night to southeast during the days. This is the very local processes, but there are another larger scale processes related, for example, with air pollution, with the cycle of air pollution in the city of Madrid. This place is just 50 kilometers far from the city center. And then these mesoscale winds can interchange properties with the main pollutants at the city. Also, they are related with the winds at the airport, at the Barajas International Airport, and also something related with the fogs developed at the airport. So not only we study local processes, we can also apply this knowledge to another larger scale processes. We have a lot of applications. And this is mainly the things that I would like to share with you.
My research in La Herrería Forest is the study of soil respiration. Soil respiration is an ecosystem process that releases carbon dioxide from soil. Research on soil respiration is important because it's one of the understood subjects in ecosystem ecology, and partly because it represents the second largest flux of carbon cycling between the atmosphere and terrestrial ecosystems. As one key process of ecosystem, soil respiration is related to ecosystem productivity, soil fertility, and regional and global carbon cycles. Soil respiration plays a critical role in the regulation of carbon cycling on regional and global scales. At the global scale, soil respiration releases carbon at a rate that is more than 1 order of magnitude larger than the anthropogenic emission. The soil pool from which soil respiration releases carbon is about 4 times the atmospheric pool. Thus, a small change in soil respiration can seriously alter the balance of atmosphere CO2 concentration. Since the global carbon cycle regulates climate change, soil respiration also becomes relevant to climate change, carbon trading, and environmental policy. Since climate change is one of the main challenges facing humanity, quantification of soil respiration is relevant to farmers, foresters, and governments. Can respiratory carbon emissions and/or photosynthetic carbon uptake be manipulated to maximize carbon storage? Can the managed carbon sinks that long enough to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions in the future? How will soil respiration respond to natural and anthropogenic perturbations? To answer these questions, soil respiration has to be carefully studied. We have to understand the processes involved in soil respiration, examine how these processes respond to environmental change, and account for their spatial and temporal variability. In order to do so, we have to make accurate measurements of soil respiration.
Well, good morning. My name is Felix Garcia. I'm a former technician of GuMNet network, but now I'm devoting most of my time to my PhD in climate science, which is focused on assessing the play role by the land surface models when they are coupled to another climate system, such as the atmosphere and the ocean. So basically, we work with the hypothesis that heat propagation takes place by conduction, which is a way of heat propagation that consists of transferring of energy by molecular vibration, molecular contact between the molecules of the material. So that's the main mechanism that takes place in the soil as it's a solid material, let's say. So to check those hypotheses, well, that hypotheses, we go for observational data because they are a good benchmark to test that hypothesis and see if models are working with a mechanism that represents fairly the reality or not. So in our case, with the GuMNet data, what we do is studying temperature series at different depths in 6 stations that are distributed over the area at different heights. And what we do is just analyzing those series with the hypothesis that, again, the thermal propagation occurs mainly by conduction. By conduction, what happens is that the harmonics that we have at the surface, that is the waves, for example, the annual and the diurnal waves that we see because of the cycles, the diurnal and the annual cycle, tend to attenuate with depth, that is, that they lose amplitude and shift and shift it. There's a time that the mechanism needs to progress into depth, so you see the waves that are phase shifted towards the surface. And by assessing that process with the proper tools, let's say, by linear regression, we can have an estimate of the diffusivity coefficient. That is a constant, which is a property of the material that controls the diffusivity process. And we are doing so with the analysis that I'm showing here in this figure. And the results permit us to know how is the structure of the of the soil, and we have different materials at different soil layers. And well, we are still working on it because there are more complex tools that allows us to get different results. But I think this this that I'm telling you represents fairly what we do in our daily research line. And that's all from my part. Thank you for listening.
So my aim is to explain to you briefly that within GuMNet, as Felix has already mentioned, we have different stations. At every station we were able to obtain a soil profile and also create the boreholes. This has enabled us to be able to explain much more, not just what's around the station, but what's also in the subsurface of that area. And as was mentioned already, we're here in at the foothills of the Sierra de Guadarrama, and this has made it possible that through the stations we have a whole sequence of different soils. We can talk about the climate sequence, we can talk about the topographic sequence, we can talk about a lithology sequence, and we can also talk about a biogeographical sequence. So all these sequences enable us to actually study along a profile from 925 meters up to over 2,000 meters, different types of soils and the conditions they are in. This is especially important when we're looking at climate changes and trying to explain what is happening nowadays. So these soils, they will vary according to their location, their exposition, and the different conditions there in their immediate surrounding. For example, at the highest altitude, we'll have a soil which is poorly developed in a mountainous area and will not be have a lot of different soil horizons. We're talking here about soil horizons because we identify the soils according to these different horizons. We can talk about an A horizon, a B horizon, a C horizon. They're in different phases of development and evolution, and that will mean that the uppermost soil horizon, the A horizon, will normally contain more organic material. This organic material is especially important for all the processes which are more biological, with the microbiology and the real development of the surface of the soil. When we get to the lower horizons, we're talking about the B or C. In the high mountainous area, we're talking mainly about C horizons. That's really the horizon most related with the parent material. I was talking about lithosequence. The lithosequence will vary from where we're standing, which is more a granitic type of rock, to metamorphic rock, which is gneiss, known as gneiss. And these differences in rock composition will also be important when the soil initially develops. Regarding the organic material content in the different soils along the topography, it will be important to distinguish, because mountainous soils or mountain soils can have a lot of organic material, but it's not well mineralized. Here, our soil profile starts with a horizon with little organic material, and then immediately goes over to different sea horizons. These sea horizons are successions of deposits of material when maybe there was more material eroded in a different climate setting, and other times when there was less material deposited. What we can see is different size fragments in the subsoil in the different horizons. That's how we distinguish the different horizons. Furthermore, we have to say that in this area, the bedrock will start around 2 meters. From 2 meters onwards, we actually have granite. And in this type of granite, in the upper part, we'll have more weathered granite. And as we go further into depth, we'll find the granite which is well conserved. In this case, I've brought a sample here, and we can see this is a sample taken at 5 meters, and it's a granite which is weathered, but has a rough, typical consistency, granular, with a lot of quartz, feldspar, and also mica, etc. So the composition of this granite will go right down to the 20 meters, which has been mentioned before in the boreholes. But if we look in our surrounding, we will also encounter bedrock which comes to the surface. So I think we have a great chance in this group and in this project to actually be able to study soils with a huge difference between one station and the other. And this will also help us to relate all things related with climate to the actual setting of the project objectives which we're aiming to do. Thank you.